The alley smelled of rain and industrial waste. Elias Thorne stepped over the yellow tape, leveled his camera, and waited for the silence to settle. He clicked the shutter, freezing the victim in a final, awkward sprawl. 2 hours later, in the suffocating heat of his darkroom, Elias submerged the negative. The image bled onto the paper. He rocked the tray, watching the gray tones deepen into black. He leaned over the basin, his breath hitching. In the initial frame, the victim's index finger had rested flat against the concrete. On the paper, the hand was twisted. The finger was pressed firmly against the brick wall, a clear, deliberate mark of movement. Elias rubbed his eyes, the smell of acetic acid stinging his nostrils. He looked again. The finger had not returned to its place. It remained pinned against the brick, a silent, impossible defiance of the photograph he had taken only hours before. He reached out, his fingertip hovering just millimeters above the wet paper, and waited for the image to change again. The next case came a week later. A mob hit in a basement. Elias snapped 6 frames, and in the final print, the victim stood upright, a skeletal finger pointing directly at the lens. Then came the sound. A faint static from the paper formed words, whispering the location of ledgers buried beneath a pier. Elias acted. He delivered the intel, and 3 syndicate bosses went to prison. The city called him a legend. He solved the impossible, his darkroom becoming a graveyard of testimonies etched in light and shadow. But the dead did not always provide simple answers. As he processed more rolls, the whispers began to change. They grew louder, sharper, twisting into agonizing screams. The voices detailed the corruption he ignored to keep his edge, naming names he was paid to overlook. He spent his nights in the red glow of the studio, his hands stained with developer, listening to the cacophony of the murdered. Every solved case felt like a debt he could not repay. He kept the shutter clicking, trapping the truth on film, even as the screams began to bleed into his waking hours, drowning out the silence he once craved. The year was 1992. Elias walked into his studio, the floorboards groaning under his weight. He stopped, dead. On his desk sat a fresh roll of film, canister uncapped, waiting. He checked his logbook, but the pages were empty. He had no memory of shooting it. He reached out, the metal of the canister biting cold against his skin. He loaded the film into the tank, his movements mechanical, driven by a sudden, irrational compulsion. As he poured the developer, the temperature in the darkroom plummeted. His breath turned to mist, swirling in the dim red light. The air felt heavy, dense with a static charge that made the hair on his arms stand up. He stared at the tank, waiting for the chemical reaction to finish. But the usual silence of the room was gone. Instead, there was a low, rhythmic vibration coming from the basin. It was not the sound of water.